All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, team. That was an amazing job you worship leaders did, and I love the atmosphere. I just love everything about this place. It's so good to be back with you. If you'd like, let's follow the actual Bible. We're going to start in the book of Proverbs, but I've created slides so to make it a whole lot easier. I get to open the Bible tonight, which I take seriously, and so you want to ask a couple questions. One, what happened? And two, and more importantly, what's happening in me right now because of what happened? So I want to talk to you about emotional health tonight. This will be a unique sort of message. If you've only known me as the Bible teacher that tells the history underneath stuff and it makes the Bible go, wow, good. But I want to show you that there's another arrow in my quiver, and I want to talk about what it means to live emotionally in control. And what we're going to find is that the idea of emotional control is a myth. There is no such thing as emotional control. There is a such thing as imagination control. There's a such thing as thought control. And those things are what we're talking about when we talk about emotional control. So I want to look at a couple scriptures, and let me explain how this is going to be, all right? Some sermons build point on point. So they go, okay, if A is true and B is true and C is true, then D is how we apply this. This is not one of those sermons. Some sermons are built historically. Some sermons are built in a narrative. This is going to be a Gatling gun, all right? So this is going to be just point after point after point after point after point after point after point. And here's my goal, right? My goal is that no one in here is going to pick up every point, but that somebody over here, two of these points are going to make a lot of sense. But someone over here, a different 2 points is going to make a lot of sense. And someone back there is so if I say something tonight and you go, I don't get that at all, it's not for you. Just sort of tune me out for 30 seconds and the next one's coming. But pay right close attention, right? So let's look at this. So this is Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7. This is a guy named Solomon, and this is a part of the wisdom literature in Scripture. For as he thinks within himself, so a deep, not a passing thought, a deep internal thought. As he thinks within himself, so is he. October 1993, the University of California at Los Angeles did a groundbreaking new study where for the first time they proved something that now they know to be true, and whole sections and genres of psychology have come from it. Specifically, Dr. Carolyn Leaf has made an incredible career with neuroplasticity and neuroprogramming. But where it all started was October 1993. What they did is they took a bunch of people with OCD, like obsessive compulsive, like people who have to wash their hands 50 times a day. And what they did is they put them in a controlled environment. No tablets at all. If you had a headache, it had to be logged that you took an aspirin, right? And with no medical help at all they gave them was thought therapy. It was called cognitive restructuring. And what they did was they gave them truth thoughts to read, say, 50 times a day. But the idea is you had to read it until you could feel it inside. So you read it, you saw it, you felt it. You read it, you saw it, you felt it. And what they did is they did that for 12 weeks. And they took a PET scan, which is a neural image scan of the brain. They took a PET scan for when they entered. And then 12 weeks later, they took an exit PET scan. And what they found was that with no pharmaceutical aid at all, just with the assistance of truth thoughts until you could feel it, it physically changed the caudate nucleus of the brain. And so what they proved was that telling ourselves the truth physically changed the physical, literal, neuronal fibers of our brain. Now, here's why that's important. Because you don't actually see anything. None of us do. We only take pictures with our eyes, and then our brain tells us what we're seeing. And so the idea is that if we can change the physical structure of the brain with telling ourselves the truth, we can change not the reality, but we can change how we perceive that reality, and then it changes how we feel about that reality. That what sounds like emotional control actually is imagination control or thought control. Here's a poem. It's actually, I think the genre of this psalm was David letting us into his journal entry. So David wrote some journals, and they ended up as songs, and then somewhere later they were compiled, and we're still looking at them today. And so what happens is with the songs, Sometimes we can look into someone's process from thousands of years ago about how they processed their reality. And I wonder if we can identify with what David is saying here. Next slide. So he says this, I said, I will watch my ways and I will keep my tongue from sin. Anybody here ever promised yourself something and you knew you couldn't keep it? Like I am never gonna eat that much in one sitting ever again. Lie. You know what? I'm gonna walk into that situation with those two people that annoy me, and tonight they will not, I will keep my mouth shut no matter what they do. Lie. This is David here. I said I'll watch my ways and I'll keep my tongue from sin. And watch how graphic he gets with his illustration. I will put a muzzle on my mouth while in the presence of the wicked. Obviously a metaphor. Please don't read this literally. David walking around with that awkward. I'll put a muzzle on my mouth. So I remained utterly silent. In other words, he did well for a little while. I remained utterly silent. Not even saying anything good. In other words, I took it so far, I just was mute. But my anguish increased. In other words, the more I tried not to do something, the more I really wanted to do it. And it's an interesting psychological phenomenon there that all the power of sin lies in the forbiddance of that sin, right? Like the forbiddance is what, think about it, this is true in the Genesis creation story, right? Like what is interesting about a garden where the central antagonist is a piece of fruit? That's not interesting. It's actually boring until you forbid the fruit. Now it's interesting. The forbiddance is what makes the allure of it something. It's like it gives it legs. I remained utterly, but my anguish increased. Then my heart grew hot within me. And while I meditated, the fire burned hotter. And then I spoke with my mouth. In other words, David's process of action was he thought it, he felt it, he said it, he did it. And that's exactly all of us. All of us are different. In this room, there's introverts, there's extroverts, there's ambiverts, hopefully no perverts, right? There's people who you're a party waiting to happen. There are people that this is the first time you've left your house since Netflix was introduced to Australia, right? But regardless of your basic wiring, our behavior acts like this. We think it, we feel it, we say it, we do it. A couple of questions I want to pose to us tonight. One, next slide. If you could wave a magic wand and fix your emotions, what emotion would have to go? Like, what's the thing you just hate? Like, if you could fix that, like, and everybody would be different. When I feel stressed, I eat 5,000 calories. I hate that about myself. Or when I feel stressed, I smoke cigarettes. That's only, I hate that about myself. Or I tend to play things out in my imagination 50 times worse than they actually are. I hate that about myself. And I think it's good to just be honest about that. And we're all different, but we all have a thing. We all have something. Two, in a perfect world, how would you be different than you are right now? What do you wish, if God controlled anything, which God doesn't control anything, right? Why? Because God laid down his right to control everything by emptying himself. God is close and God does care. But if love is the primary ethic, God is not stepping over your will ever, right? And actually, if you look at the cross, every temptation of Jesus on the cross, not in the wilderness, but every temptation of Jesus on the cross was use your ultimate power to violate our free will. If you are who you say you are, control us, Almighty. Jesus, like, even in great stress, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Jesus is not in the business of controlling people. He is in the business of engaging our broken story in order to make a better narrative. That's what he's in. That God is not judging your broken story, nor is he condemning it, nor is he criticizing it. But from Genesis 1, when he saw the watery chaos and the disorder, he engages that story in order to make a better story. The idea that God is too holy to be in the presence of sin, I get what people try to say when they say that, but I think the opposite's true. I think it's more profound to say God is too holy not to engage that sinful narrative in order to get in the middle of it and make a better narrative. So before we go anywhere, I want us to understand that God is willing to get in the middle middle of our broken narrative in order to make a more beautiful story. Next slide. Here's the problem. Emotions are complicated, but generally follow a 4-step process. Thought, feeling, speaking, acting. Repeat. We think it, we feel it, we say it, we do it. We think it, we feel it, we say it, we do it. We think it, we feel it, we say it, we do it. That what we call emotional control, that's a farce. It's actually thought control, or it's imagination control, or it's what we see. Let's say it this way. Emotions are tied to both imagination and reality. Here's the problem. Emotions are terrible at telling the difference between the two. You can have actual, physical, real, literal emotions about a total imagination. And we've all had that before. In the positive, we've had it. All of us at some point have played the what if I win the lottery game. Are you gonna win the lottery? No. But if you could think about it long enough and feel it, you could actually start making deals with God. This is what I would do with this. I would start 40 orphanages, right? And in the middle of that ridiculous imagination, your emotions feel what it would feel like to have $100 million, right? We've all had an imagination that someone was attracted to us, whether they were or were not. And we play that out and that feels good in the moment. We've also had destructive imaginations. We've all saw ourselves walking into a room of new people and them not liking us at all. All of us have had that dream at night where we show up to something important naked. And we're wondering, have you never had that? Have you never had a dream where you're thinking, where are my pants? Right? We've all had that destructive emotion where we pictured our life with them rejecting us. We've all had that. And here's the thing, emotions follow imagination. Emotions also follow reality. And it seems to be that emotions can't tell which one's which. Like if you're a parent, and I see a few parents in here, but if you're a parent and your 16-year-old is supposed to be home at midnight, it is 1:30 and no one is picking up their phone. Does your imagination go to the best case scenario or to the worst case scenario? And here's the thing, no matter what the reality is, our imagination is gonna dictate the emotions that we're feeling, right? And so that becomes really problematic. So really, disciplining our imagination to only see the truth is the key to what we call emotional control. That's what Paul said, one of the most amazing things I find in all of Scripture. He said that he learned to discipline his imagination to only obey the thoughts Christ gave him. Well, if that was even true of my life 50% of the time, my life would be infinitely better. It would be infinitely better because your emotions tie to imagination and to reality, but it can't tell the difference between the two. Number 4, next slide. Emotions don't behave in nice, neat boxes. I think this is why the scriptures differ on emotional reaction advice. Like you can't just go to the Bible and find one static way of responding to certain things. Because I think if the Bible only gave us one static way to do that, I would question what it was on about, because life doesn't give us one static way of responding to things, and circumstances are different. Like let me just read a few of these. This is from the wisdom literature in a book called Ecclesiastes. Next one. This is written by a teacher named Willard. And here's what he says, Ecclesiastes chapter 7. The end of the matter is better than the beginning. Let's just stop and think about that for a second. In general, isn't that true? Yeah, like if you overreact too early in a situation, oftentimes you find out if you just saw it through, it would have taken care of itself, right? There's some good wisdom in that. Yeah. The end of the matter is better than the beginning, and patience is better than pride. Yes. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. True. I can tell you, my master's degree is in clinical psychology. I can tell you that when you get angry, an enzyme is released in your brain that tells all the extra blood in your brain to go to the major muscle groups to prepare for a fight. It is a physiological mechanism given to you by God to protect you in times of true danger. What happens is all the spare blood in your brain goes to your major muscle groups to prepare for a fight. Your peripheral vision goes away. You focus on just what is right in front of you. You get exceptionally strong and can sometimes do feats of amazing strength. Why? Because all the extra blood from your brain is in the major muscle groups to prepare for a fight. Here is the problem with that. When the average person gets angry and all the blood leaves their brain and goes to the major muscle groups to prepare for a fight, you lose on average 25% of your workable IQ. Most people cannot afford that. The average IQ in the world is 100 point. Dysfunctionally mentally handicapped is 70. So when the average person gets angry, you are this close to dysfunctionally mentally handicapped. And if you're here tonight and you're married, if in your last argument, the two of you got angry, what you essentially had is two mentally handicapped people trying to solve a problem. Anger resides in the lap of fools. Think about it. When's the last time you said something smart when you were angry? How many times have you said something you had to go back and say, please forgive me, I didn't mean it. I was just mad. A lot. Like men do stupid things when they're angry. We're borderline stupid anyway. Right? But you remove 25% of our IQ. Like I spoke to men before who had a cast on his hand. What'd you do? I hit a brick wall. Why? I was angry. Sometimes men get so angry they can't even complete a sentence. So they just grunt. You're like, come again? Women, we won't get into what women do when they're angry, but it's all, can we all agree together that when we're at the peak of our anger, it's the time that we can look back on and go, that was foolish? Sure. This is Paul in Ephesians 4. Get rid of all anger, bitterness, rage, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice. But rather be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ forgave you. Really good advice. In other words, don't fight those things. Replace them with kindness. That's interesting. Here's Proverbs 19:11. Fools give full vent to their rage. Absolutely. We just talked about that. But the wise person brings calm. So if you're ever wondering if someone's wise or not, watch their basic disposition in conflict and ask, are they basically people who bring calm? That's what the Bible says. Those are the wise people, the ones who bring calm to situations. The ones who throw water on fire, not gasoline. These are the wise people. But then this is weird statement that the same guy that says get rid of all anger, 4 verses before that, here's what he says. Be angry and do not sin. So which is it? Am I meant to be angry or get rid of all my anger? What are you talking about? You said 2 different things in 4 verses. Paul, what do you want about? I love the way the rabbis teach this. Here's what they say. If you stay angry at the right things, you won't have enough energy to give yourself to sinful things. In other words, if you stay angry at oppression and slavery and poverty and injustice, and you really give yourself to partnering with the risen Christ to fix the broken parts of our world, you will not have enough energy to destroy your life with other things. Oh, I love that. I love that. So I wrote 13 principles. Now here comes the Gatling gun, ready? So if I read something and you're like, I don't get that one, don't worry about it. There's one coming that you will get. 13 principles to help us with our imagination and thought control, our emotional health. 13 thoughts that we can apply. Let's start going through these. Next slide. 1, we can never beat a destructive emotion by fighting it. We must replace it with something attached to a greater pleasure. You cannot beat something by fighting it. Fighting it only empowers it. If I was to say, okay, here's the thing. I've got $1,000 in my pocket, and I will give $1,000 to anyone in here who can make it to the end of the night by not thinking about a pink, purple, polka-dotted elephant. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna not think about a pink, purple, polka-dotted elephant. That was a tongue twister. We're gonna not do it. And listen, do not think of a pink, purple, polka-dotted elephant. I saw that. Don't do that. Don't think of a pink, purple, polka-dotted elephant. By the nature of trying so hard not to think about something, you just empower the vision of what you're trying not to think about. You cannot defeat a destructive emotion by fighting it. You have to replace it. We have to use our brains the way God wired our brains to help us with this. And here, this is a caricature, but here's how our brains are wired. Our brains are hardwired to embrace pleasure and avoid pain. If your brain knows something is painful, it will avoid it at all costs. It's hardwired that way to protect you. It's like if I had a hot plate and I said, listen, I'll give you $10,000 to stick your hand on this 300 degrees Celsius hot plate. There might be a lunatic willing to do that. But what would it look like if they did? They go, I'll do it. 10 grand, I'll put my hand against that hot plate. Okay, come on up. What would it look like? It would look, he would go, What's he doing? What do we call that? He's psyching himself out. Do you know the etymology of the phrase to psych yourself out means to lose your mind? Why? Because to purposely engage in something that causes pain requires us to disconnect from our brain. Our brain will not let us purposely embrace things we know are painful. So when we're engaging things that bring us pain, the key to doing that is telling ourselves the truth in a disciplined imagination that activity brings pain, not pleasure. When you watch somebody engaging in something that will ultimately destroy their life, you can know that somewhere in their brain, in their imagination, they've told themselves that there's pleasure at the end of this. Somewhere there's pleasure at the end of this. But if we simply tell ourselves the truth, no, that activity brings pain. That activity brings pain. When we can discipline our imagination to tell our brain the truth about that, our brain will help us avoid that. But you don't beat it by fighting it. You replace it with something. You do two things. You tell yourself the truth about the pain it causes, and you replace it with something of greater pleasure. 2, the most effective way of attaching pleasure and pain proactively is with a disciplined imagination. If you don't like that word imagination, think vision, think thought, think what we see. Imagination just is the way we see our reality, the way we see our world. And I love the way the rabbis teach this. They say, a fleeting imagination will not harm you, nor help you. So if you have a fleeting destructive thought, as long as it comes and goes, whatever. But it's when we discipline our imagination, when we discipline what we see, our emotions start attaching to it, and our reality will start drawing to it. The most effective way of attaching pleasure to something is with a disciplined imagination. And I don't have to tell you that. We do it all the time. If we have an activity and we know that activity is gonna bring pleasure, we might think about it all day. We'll picture it in our head all day, and we can start feeling the feelings of it all day. We do it all the time. Or if we know we're fixing to enter into something stressful, we can picture that in our head as well, and we'll feel the pain associated with it. We can do this all the time. This is not some magic trick. It's something that we do all the time. Number 3, next slide. Give yourself lots of grace when you fail. Remember, Jesus wept, and Paul lashed out to the point of wishing people castrated themselves, right? If you're wondering where that's in the book of Galatians. And he says, if the Judaizers who are demanding that you circumcise, if they still demand you circumcise, just tell them to cut the whole thing off, right? Now, this is a guy he's lashing out a bit, right? So our emotions don't fit in nice, neat boxes, nor do our victory over those emotions fit in nice, neat boxes. You have to give yourself a whole lot of space when you're dealing with things. Number 4, and I think this is one everyone can do. Give attention to what you want instead of what you don't want. Give all your attention and all your energy to the things you want instead of the things you do not want. What happens is if there's a situation and there's 2 possible outcomes, one outcome we want and one outcome we absolutely do not want. What happens is if we discipline our imagination for 2 straight days to worry about the things what if that happens? What if that happens? And tell me, I'm not the only one in the room that's played the what if game. And that what if game is terrible. And it never works out as bad as you picture it anyway, right? You felt all these emotions. You're like, oh, that wasn't so bad, right? Remember, was it the last Dumb and Dumber movie where Lloyd Crispus gets thrown out of the science fair and he goes, so that's what rock bottom feels like. Not so bad, right? Like we all have played the game in our imagination to make things worse than they are. But the truth of it is that if we give attention to what we don't want, we build an atmosphere around ourselves where we draw what we don't want to us. Let me give you an example. If you're walking into a new social situation and you're worried that they will reject you, right? Now listen, let me be clear about this. If you're not worried at all that people you've never met will reject you, you might be a sociopath, okay? Like if it doesn't even cross your mind, or if you think, I truly don't care if they reject me or not, check yourself, right? Like you probably should care a little bit, right? So, but if you spend the whole day or 2 days or 3 days leading up to it thinking, they're not gonna they're gonna reject me, they're not gonna like it, what will happen is we'll create an atmosphere around ourselves where they will reject you. And then you'll go, see, I was right. See, that was, but if we give all of our attention in our imagination and our thoughts to what is true, just, lovely, praiseworthy, of good work, if we give all of our attention to what we want instead of what we don't, the same atmosphere builds around us and we begin to draw the things that we want to us. Number 5, generalize the negative and be specific about the positive. This is one that anyone can do. If you want to get to rein your emotions in, here's what you do not do. Do not ignore it. Do not pretend it doesn't exist. Your brain's going, liar. If you had a bad day, be able to say, I had a bad day. If you're worried about the medical test, to go, not worried, not worried, not worried, all good, all good, all good. All good, not worried about it, not worried about it, all good, all good. That's actually only making us aware of how much we're actually worried about it. Yeah. There's a way to do it more healthy, and that is this: generalize the negative. Anything you want to give value to, you're specific. And anything you want to decrease value from, you're general about it. I'll give you an example. If your wife cooks you a meal, and at the end of that meal, she says, did you like the meal? And you go, yeah, it's all right. Have you said anything negative? No. Are you in trouble? Yeah. Why? Because being general devalues the effort someone put in. You don't have to be negative, you just have to be general. Anything we're general about, we have removed value from it. Anything we're specific about, we add value to it. On Friday night, I had Nina's gnocchi. And let me tell you about Nina's gnocchi. One way to decrease value from it is to go, yeah, it's all right. It's pretty good, right? No! It was light, fluffy, melted in your mouth, was covered in sauce, had fresh chili, had brajol on the side. Who puts brajol on the side? Nina's gnocchi. The brajol was stuffed with spices and flavor that I couldn't readily identify quickly. It was so amazing, I couldn't even get my head around it. Now see, what I've just done is I've added value to the meal, to the effort of the person who made the meal, and I only did that by being specific. Like if somebody said to me, how was your experience at Emerge Church on Sunday? If you go, yeah, it's good. Yeah. You've actually devalued your experience. But if you went, you know what? I gotta be honest, I had a pretty amazing time. The host and hostesses, they were so friendly and nice. They had fake plants and decor, and they made it so pretty and awesome. The coffee was amazing while I was waiting. I felt safe because of the whole COVID safe thing. I never felt like I was jeopardizing my health. The atmosphere of the worship was awesome. The climate in the room was cool and comfortable. The preaching was at least average and meaningful. This was a pretty amazing experience. See, anything we want to add value to, we're specific about it. If you want to decrease value from it, you're just general. So here's what you do. If you've had a bad day and somebody says, how was your day? Don't deny it. Don't ignore it. Don't fight it. Just go, wasn't the best day. You've generalized the negative. Which parts? I don't worry about it. Just in general, wasn't the best day. But I tell you what was awesome. I woke up today in Australia where there's motor cars, paved road stores that prepackage food for me, clean water in my tap, machines that do washing, other machines that do drying, world-class healthcare right down the road, and it's largely free. It's one of the safest nations on the earth. It's actually the lowest crime per capita of any nation on the earth. I'm living in a secure, affluent nation. Hey, I woke up this morning with a family that loves me. I have 2 great kids. Like, this is see, when we're specific about the positive, we empower one and generalize the negative to disempower the other. Number 6, you'll never, ever, 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 ever get to the bottom of a negative feeling by talking about it. Anyone that tells you, we need to get to the bottom of why you feel this way before we can change your life, they're making $150 an hour off of you. Because here's the thing. Even if you get to the bottom, and there ain't no bottom, but even if you get to the bottom, so now what? Well, you still got to make the decision to change your life. So you may as well get about changing your life. There is no bottom. Focus on the positive and be solution focused. Number 7, regret is a wasted emotion. All of your power lies in the now. If Jesus' teaching around emotional health wasn't anything, it was this. Don't give too much thought about tomorrow. That's called fear. And don't give a whole lot of thought about yesterday. That's called regret. And it's not that we should ignore it. We should own it, take responsibility, and choose to change our life. But living in regret, that doesn't help us. Too much focus on tomorrow, fear and anxiety. Too much focus on yesterday, guilt and regret. Actually, all of our power lies in the right now. Where do you want to change your life starting today? And move forward. Number 8, the best way to manifest what you want is to think and feel as though it's already true. Like somebody asked me, this was a while back in a Q&A, I have a lost family member who I love, and I'm believing God that they'll understand their need for God's salvation. What else could I do? And I said, well, what you want to do is in your imagination, you want to see them as a fully devoted follower of Christ. Because here's what will happen. If you see them that way, when you speak to them, you'll draw that out of them. But if you see them as the other, as the unsaved, you won't even notice it, but you'll start talking to them as if they're that, and you'll draw that out of them. The best way to manifest what you want is to see it as if it's already true. So let's talk about marriage for a second. Have you ever laid in bed at night and thought, I just want my spouse to change? Well, good luck. The best way to draw something out of your spouse is to treat them as if it's already true, and you'll draw that out of them. The best way to change your spouse is to change yourself and to change how you see them. Number 9, I have to get what I want before I can feel better is a disempowering myth. You can feel better now by changing what you see. Philosophically, that's called the lie of the sacred object. The lie of the sacred object is anytime we believe that something outside of us can make us feel better about ourselves if we just got it. There's something outside me, I don't currently have it, but if I could just get it, I'd feel so much better. Lie. That's called the lie of the sacred object. Even if it's a good thing, it won't make you feel better. Like even if you need to lose 20 kilos and then you do, well, losing 20 kilos is a good thing, but if you're not enough without it, you'll never be enough with it. You'll just be a 20 kilo lighter version of your discontented self. Right? Like you say, oh, I just want to, if I just, you know what, I'm unhappy with my life. If I just got married, I'd feel better. No, you won't. No, you won't, because there's no such thing as a happy marriage that was forged between two miserable single people. You'll never hear that story. Oh, you know what, we hated our life, and then we got married. It fixed everything. No. Marriage doesn't solve problems. Marriage magnifies problems, right? Anything that's outside of you, the lie is that I'll feel better if I get it. That's not true. You can feel better now by changing what we see in our disciplined thoughts. Number 10, a touchstone memory is very powerful. Find a thought that gives you a different feeling, not necessarily a solution. You can always go back to how you feel when you saw something. Number 11, living with the delusion of control will lead you to being emotionally agitated and unhinged. In other words, mind your own business. We always feel worse after attempting to control someone. Listen, the opposite of love is control. This is why, listen, if somebody said to you in a problem, don't worry, God's in control. Listen, don't get mad at them. Here's what they mean. God is close, God is in the middle of this, and God does care. That's what they mean to say. But control? Listen, God is the primary cause of all things, like gravity, right? But because love is the highest ethic, he consents to secondary causes, like human will and natural law. Let's use gravity as the example. Have you ever wondered, why if God's in control is there so much suffering? Well, let's use gravity as the example. Is God the primary cause of all things? Yes. Does that include gravity? Yes. How many of us are thankful for that? All of us. Gravity is the reason we're here. Gravity is the reason we appear right side up, but we're actually upside down to America. In America, they call you the land down under. but they appear right side up to them. We appear right. We're going 60,000 miles a second around a ball of fire. And yet we all feel like we're sitting still. Why? Gravity. But somebody in the world today is going to take on gravity poorly. They're going to test gravity. And gravity is going to be the reason they die. Did God kill them? No. They tested gravity. And here's what you find in Scripture and in our life, that God is the primary cause of all things, but he's also gracious enough to be close to us when we test things the wrong way. If you don't remember anything else I say tonight, remember it this way: gravity and grace. That God is the primary cause of all things, but he's gracious enough to give us his presence when somebody or ourselves test those things in an unwise way. It's gravity and grace. Controlling someone will never make you feel better. God, the theological, if you're a theologian, the theological word for this is kenosis, that he emptied himself. This is in Philippians 2. That all the temptations of Christ on the cross was, use your power to control us. No, love's the primary ethic. No, I'm not gonna overstep human will. I'm not gonna do this. Trying to control someone else does nothing but harm our life. It'll leave you emotionally unhinged, because here's the thing, at some point, we all realize, I can't control them. And the sooner, the better. Number 12, it's okay to consider it later. The world will not end. It's actually okay, if it's too much, it's okay to consider it later. And number 13, be a script writer and not a historian. All your power lies in your decision now to take responsibility for where you are, not blaming, and move forward. Listen, if we go back to Genesis 1, even before sin came on the scene, people were given a purpose by God to take responsibility for the world around them. This is before sin. God says, part of you finding your purpose in life is taking responsibility. And what's the opposite of taking responsibility? Blaming. So when sin came on the thing, what did they do? They blamed. They did the exact opposite of what we were called to do. Part of us finding our purpose in life is simply stepping back and going, it's not my mother's fault, it's not my father's fault, it's not their fault. Wherever I am is a result of my decisions, and I can empower my life by taking responsibility for that today and choosing light and life and increase going forward. Be a script writer, not a historian. Now let me give you 4 tools to do this. 4 things that we can employ to do this. 1 is deep breathing. Now, don't get scared. It's good to breathe deep, right? We are designed by God to take 6 breaths a minute. You have optimum energy at 6 breaths a minute. That's 6 seconds in and 6 seconds out. Do you see why we're so tired? We breathe shallowly, and eventually it runs us down. I love this in the Lord's Prayer, because number 2 is contemplative prayer. And we just know this intuitively. How many of you have ever been stressed and you got to the end of what you thought you could take and you went, there's something in us that knows. I love the Lord's Prayer. When Jesus was teaching people to pray, he said, when you pray, don't make it about the many words and don't make it about your needs, which is so convicting. He says, don't make it about many words. That's what pagans do. Don't make it about your needs. Don't you know your Father knows what you need before you ask? But when you pray, say this: my Father who's in heaven, hallowed be your name. In my opinion, it's the worst translation in the whole Bible. In the Greek of Matthew and in the Hebrew version of Matthew, this is what it says: my Father who's as close to me as the air that I breathe, I stop and become aware of you. Well, that's a whole lot better. The word translated heaven is the word Uranos, which, by the way, is plural. So if you're going to translate it heaven, you got to translate it heavens. But nowhere else in any Hellenistic literature is the word Uranos translated heaven or heavens. It's translated air or breath. Essentially, Jesus says, this is how you pray. Stop and realize that the supplier of everything you need is as close to you as the air that we breathe. My Father, who's as close to me as the air that I breathe, I stop and become aware of you. Now, we know this intuitively. It's in our songs. This is the air I breathe. It's in the Psalms, in the scripture as well, that God was in our breath. If you've got a second, I've got something pretty cool about the Lord's Prayer as well. It says, when you pray, say this: my Father who is in heaven, my Father who's in the air that I breathe, I stop and become aware of you. Your kingdom come, your will be done on the earth as it is in heaven. In other words, may I see the rule of God on this earth in front of me here now today. Let me be a part of that. And give us today our daily bread. Now, what's interesting is the word daily isn't there. If you're going to translate that word daily, you have to translate it tomorrow's bread. But the more common translation is, give us today transcendent bread. In other words, give me a supply today that removes my fear of lack tomorrow. Because if you're broke and I give you a loaf of bread, as soon as you finish eating it, you're worried about where the next loaf comes from. Jesus' prayer was, and when you pray, say this: my supply that's as close to me as the air that I breathe, I stop and become aware of you. Let me see your rule here on the earth as it is in heaven, and give me today a supply of bread that removes my fear of lack tomorrow. That would be transcendent. So in other words, deep breathing, contemplative prayer. What does that mean? It means inviting Jesus into the situation and asking, how would this be different if you were involved with it? Seeing Jesus, projecting Jesus into the situation, giving yourself to it and saying, wait a minute, have I done all I can do? And if I've done all I can do, can I step back and leave the rest with God? Deep breathing, contemplative prayer. 3, gratitude for what's in my right now. This is a spiritual exercise I do on a daily basis. 10 times a day for 10 seconds. It's a really easy spiritual thing we could do. 10 times a day for 10 seconds, I stop and I'm thankful only for what's in my right now. I'm not allowed to believe God for more. I do that in other parts of my prayer time. But 10 times a day for 10 seconds, I stop and I'm only thankful for what's in my right now. And it is amazing what that will do to your perspective when you're only thankful for what's in your right now, because you realize if God never did one more thing for me, my life is awesome. Did most of us in here wake up without a chemotherapy appointment today? That's called awesome. Most of us have a family that loves us. We woke up in a great country, right? We drove a car here. We have running water at home. And we're complaining about what? You know? I don't know if you were here this morning, but how many of us have ever complained about Sally in accounting? And then you hear Richard Wurmbrand's story and you're like, I was complaining about what? Or have you ever been petty about something and then you hear someone else's testimony about what they were going through and you're like, oh my goodness, I am a shallow individual, right? Why? Because trouble is light and momentary and subjective. Gratitude is not. Gratitude, when we step back and go, look, I'm thankful for this, I'm thankful for that, I'm thankful for that, I'm thankful for that. So deep breathing, taking a few times a day and just taking a deep breath and reminding ourselves that God is with us wherever we go. Asking God to enter into the situation with us. Gratitude for what's in my right now. And 4th, intentionally making someone else's life better. It's amazing when we focus on the other, how much we lose our focus on ourselves and our emotions get better. So true. Because God is not someone we love. God is someone we find in the act of love itself. When we love the other, that is where we find the presence of God, because God is in the middle of their cry. So, my brothers and sisters, may we be people who show the world what emotional control looks like. What does that look like? It looks like imagination control. May our thoughts be fixed on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. May we give all the attention to what we want instead of what we don't. Generalizing the negative, be specific about the positive. May we regularly take a deep breath, knowing God is with us, inviting him into every area. And may the God of peace give us the supply that removes our fear of lack tomorrow. May we be thankful for what's in our right now, and intentionally every day when we know we can meet a need, we live for other people. In so doing, we can start to live in emotional health ourselves. May we all live with an awareness that gravity is a thing, but so is grace. May we live in the tension of gravity and grace and be everything God has called us to be. So Lord, give us the courage to see things different, the irresistible urge to respond to what we see. May we be people who connect ourselves intimately from a spirit level to you. Give us the courage to think it, feel it, say it, do it in the most healthy way possible. My Father, who's as close to me as the air that I breathe, I stop and become aware of you. May we see your rule here on the earth as it is in heaven. And give us today the kind of supply that removes my fear of lack tomorrow. Amen. Until I see you guys next time, grace and peace, everybody. God bless.